My name's Ian. I started a small developer with my business partner in like 2010. And last August we released our first game, Rigonauts, on Steam. Then we followed it with a Android version, and last April we released the iOS version. So I wanted to give a small talk about some of the things I wish I had known when we started, in case anybody else wants to try to live off of small games. The first thing I think we learned was that you really need to make your game as fast as possible. And it doesn't mean you want to cut corners, but you want to start with a game concept that you feel you can make well in a very short amount of time. The main enemy I think we decided was a sense of you're sort of fighting obscurity when you're a small developer. And we worried very early on, that our game would have too narrow a focus. So we spent about like a year trying to make it more broad-based. And it ended up getting kind of complicated, and the scope started to get larger, and it became bigger than we could complete with the remaining of our funds, and most players were bedeviled by the center of mass. So we had created this thing that was very hard for a large number of people, and was more than we could do. And so then we sort of slashed the game in half and made something that looked a lot like the version of the game we had 2 months in, but now we finished it off. And after comparing numbers with some of the other indie developers that had gone through it by then, some of our peers, it looked like we kind of performed average. So we weren't like, a giant indie success story, but we weren't a failure either. And really, we could have gotten there about a year early. When I talk about making the game fast, if you wanted a simple measurement, I would say whatever time or money or both, timony, maybe, you can deploy towards your project, I would definitely try to make at least 2 games with that. The other thing I've learned talking to some of my various people is that the early games sort of serve to help promote the later games. So really, if you want your sort of studio to succeed and you want to be able to sort of make progress and live off your small efforts, then you really want to get the train going. And you don't ever want to make a crap game, but you don't need to like sweat making something that's perfect for everybody. Unless you have a lot of money and you have a lot of time to do so, I suppose. Then the last major lesson was, I think it's important to find a marketing angle for your game to promote yourselves that matches your studio's sort of talents. So I think about that game company, and when they released Flow, you could find this little dissertation online. It had funky fonts and it was like why Flow was not just a game, but it was like an intellectual experience. I remember Penny Arcade linking to it and people eating it up, and regardless of what you might think of Flow, I say good on them to have that angle to capture people's imaginations and get talking about it. For me and my business partner, we're just not good at that. He doesn't talk to anybody but me, and so I have to be gregarious on command, and I'm terrible at Twitter and Facebook and all that crap. So, for our next game, when we were talking about what we want to do, we realized that one of the things we are good at is getting the game up and running early and keeping it fun throughout the whole project. Now in Rigonauts, that was a game where you had level. So we could have given people access when there was only 3 levels, but then they'd play to the end and they'd be done. So definitely the next game we're doing is going to be one where people can play for a long time, and therefore we can allow people to get on early and sort of get an experience toying with the game, and so we can build a little fan base very slowly over time. Sort of like you might see frozen synapses, or I guess Minecraft is the most famous example of that. But you can do that and have much more mild success, right? But that, I think, is a case of trying to find a way to match our marketing angle to what we inherently do well, rather than finding a way to blog ourselves into fame. And so those are the main things that I kind of wish I had thought about in the beginning. The prioritized speed over perhaps the scope of the game, the planning our budget around definitely doing multiple games, that's my 5 minutes. And then making sure that we had looked at how we were good at communicating with the audience and chosen a game that fit that linked into that like a perfect puzzle piece rather than one that didn't match our skills.